It all started with a simple promise to myself. I had planned to eat healthy, exercise regularly, and finally break my bad habits. It felt easy at the time. I was motivated, determined, and convinced that my future self would follow through. But when the moment actually arrived, everything changed. I reached for junk food, skipped the workout, and fell right back into my old routine. I couldn't understand it. Why was my future self so weak? Why did they betray me? Then I discovered the hot-cold empathy gap, a psychological phenomenon that explained everything. It revealed why we fail to predict our own behavior, why we make plans we never follow, and why our future selves often feel like strangers. The hot-cold empathy gap was first explored by psychologist George Lowenstein. His experiments showed that when people are in a cold, rational state, they believe they can easily control their future actions. But when they are in a hot, emotional state, hungry, tired, angry, or craving something, logic disappears and emotions take over. One of the most famous studies involved college students. Researchers asked them how they would react if they were put in an uncomfortable situation, like being tempted by an unhealthy snack while on a diet. Most students confidently believed they would resist, but when they were actually put in that situation later, their self-control crumbled. The students who swore they wouldn't give in ended up making the same choices they had been sure they wouldn't. This experiment revealed a shocking truth. We don't actually know our future selves as well as we think we do. When we're calm, we assume our future selves will be just as rational. But when we're caught in the moment, we become completely different people. The hot-cold empathy gap explains why so many of us struggle to keep promises to ourselves. Have you ever told yourself you'd wake up early and be productive, only to hit the snooze button 10 times the next morning? That's the gap at work. Your cold self, who made the plan, can't fully understand what your hot self, who is groggy and desperate for sleep, will actually do. This happens with food, money, relationships, and even pain tolerance. Studies show that people underestimate how painful things will feel in the moment. Patients scheduled for surgery often believe they won't need painkillers afterward, only to desperately ask for them once the pain sets in. We like to believe we're consistent, rational people, but the truth is, we are at the mercy of our momentary emotions. One of the most frustrating parts of the hot-cold empathy gap is the battle between our present and future selves. Right now, you might feel motivated to save money, so you decide to put aside a large amount of your next paycheck. But when payday comes and you see something you really want, your future self suddenly doesn't seem to care about saving anymore. Psychologists call this temporal discounting. We value immediate rewards much more than future ones. A classic study found that when people were asked if they would rather have $50 now or $100 in a year, most chose the immediate $50. Our brains are wired for short-term pleasure, even if it means making decisions we regret later. Understanding the hot-cold empathy gap is the first step in overcoming it. Once you realize that your future self might not think the way your present self does, you can put safeguards in place to prevent bad decisions. Here's how. If you're trying to stick to a diet, plan your meals when you're full, not when you're hungry. If you want to avoid impulse shopping, decide your budget when you're feeling financially responsible, not when you're in a store surrounded by tempting sales. If you don't want to eat junk food, don't keep it in the house. If you want to save money, set up automatic transfers so you don't have to rely on willpower when the time comes. Lock yourself into good decisions by making them harder to break. Want to wake up early? Put your alarm clock across the room. Want to cut down on social media? Delete the apps from your phone. The more friction you add, the less likely your hot self will sabotage your plans. Studies show that people are more likely to make responsible choices when they feel connected to their future selves. Try writing a letter to yourself 5 years from now, or use an aging app to see what you'll look like in the future. The more real your future self feels, the more likely you are to make choices they'll appreciate. The day I realized my future self was a stranger, everything changed. I stopped blaming myself for my past failures and started planning for my future weaknesses. I understood that my present and future selves would never fully agree, but I could at least help them work together. We all like to believe we have control over our decisions, but the truth is our emotions and impulses play a much bigger role than we realize. The key to success isn't just willpower, it's understanding the psychology behind why we struggle and using that knowledge to outsmart ourselves. So, next time you make a promise to your future self, ask yourself, what will I really feel in that moment? Because the version of you sitting here right now might not be the same person making the choice when the time comes.